that this belief that the government borrows money off the household sector, the government has to borrow in order to spend, that is so widespread. Journalists believe it, most economists believe it, most politicians believe it. And even if you realize that it's wrong, it's really, really hard for anybody to say, look, that theory is wrong, and I'm going to do different to that theory. You get attacked like crazy. So even if Reeves was sensible and tried to say, and realised, okay, the government can running a deficit as part of how the money supply grows, and that benefits the private sector rather than reducing the supply of money, it increases the supply of money. If she tried to make that case, she'd be rubbished by the Financial Times. You've got a huge paradigm shift. Right? That's why I come back and always compare it to Galileo versus the Ptolemaic astronomers. You have to completely change how people think about the universe before you go from one to the other. You've got to change how people think about money. And the way people think about money right now is dead wrong.
Because that's the problem as well, is that, the politicians think that, but the public generally think that the deficit is terrible. I mean, even, smart people like Elon Musk talk about all the time.
Same bullshit that somebody's talking about there. Yeah.
Is terrible. So even if they wanted to, make that change, say, hey, we're going to grow the deficit, there's going to be public outrage. So really, as politicians, they can't really do that.
Yeah, you're trapped.
So because the US are constantly talking about the debt ceiling and the debt is unsustainable. So according to you, that's just not true.
That's nonsense. Like the Japanese government debt's 250% of GDP.
So what are they worried about?
Huh?
What are they worried about then?
They're worried about a chimera. They think the government's borrowing that money off the private sector, and they think the government can run out of money.
So they're worried about nothing.
They're worried about a phantom. It's a false worry. And like they worry about government debt, and what really matters is private debt. So all these worries are upside down. Like government debt is about half the level of the private debt is. So all this, like Reeves, 100% of GDP. Private debt is 200% of GDP. They don't even talk about it. So in their model, private debt is just like an act between consenting adults. So you can't control it. That's the sort of way they think about it. But in fact, when you look at the data over time, the volatility of private debt is what actually has caused financial crises. So the government debt, I think, put it this way, the UK's highest level of government debt ever was during the Napoleonic Wars. Okay? So was England a weak country at the time or a strong country?
I mean,
it was the dominant empire on the planet.
Yeah, strong. I mean, they beat Napoleon eventually, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So like the idea that government debt is a constraint on the government doesn't realize how the government actually operates. Like this is what I do. I do with my Ravel software, and I'll probably have to finish it on the train and on the way to Amsterdam tomorrow. But if you start off with the way that Loanable Funds thinks, it basically thinks the government banks with the private banks, and you have lending between households and firms and the government, households and the government, and therefore if the government borrows more money, there's less available for the firms, but there's no money creation in that system. Okay? As soon as you say the debt is the government debt is owned by the banks, okay, and the government banks are the central bank, you change the structure, the whole system changes.